Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, featuring a conversation with composer Doyle Donehoo. You might know his music if you ever played Warhammer, but we're talking about Aliens: Dark Descent, which is a real-time tactics game set 19 years after the original Aliens franchise takes place. And you can hear his music and instantly know we're in Alien world. Aliens, the franchise world. It's really great. Doyle also is an engineer. He programmed his own MIDI software in the early 2000s. He's also an adept programmer with assembly language, and he likens programming computers to composition in that you're taking small pieces of information, be it small sets of instructions or notes, and creating something larger from it and more cohesive in a whole, like a larger computer function or a piece of music. Really cool. Doyle also is a huge fan of the Alien franchise. He saw it in the theater in 1979, which is crazy. And he also was one of the first people in the world to see Star Wars. So he talks about that, which was super cool to hear him talk about. As great as his music is, you will not hear it in this video version. We do that for copyright reasons, so you have to listen to the audio podcast if you want to hear the music samples. And that's what we've been doing since 2011 anyway, so that's our original format, and we recommend you listen to that. Join us on Discord. That link is down in the show notes, and if you can support us financially on Patreon, we'd be so grateful. Patreon.com/level. All right, Doyle and I start off talking about his massive love and passion for the Aliens franchise.
Believe me, I have a stack of books that are all about Alien. They're newspapers, programs, graphic novels, the whole thing. Because I saw Alien in the movie theater in a curved screen, cinerama kind of thing in a dome theater. And it scared the crap out of me when I
it's terrifying.
Just the credits with the music scared the crap out of me. And then as the movie, I loved the movie, and I remember I went back like several times to see the movie. I remember having to take a bathroom break, and I was back in the lobby, and there were people who had fled to the lobby who couldn't handle it, and someone actually puked. So I know the impact of it. I mean, I'm very familiar with the impact of the movie and how it's beloved in some masochistic ways, I might say, but still beloved.
Yeah, no, it's just absolutely fantastic, and you know, the movies have a sound, right? I mean, thanks to Goldsmith and Horner, and like they did such just amazing musical things. And
Goldsmith, Horner, and Goldenthal. I always include him as well.
For sure, Elliot Goldenthal.
You can say Frizzle too, but who does some good things, but kind of diminishes.
Or changes. It changed. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of leads to a point that I saw, is that as a person who has a wall full of soundtracks, mostly in CDs and some, black licorice too, vinyl. I do have when the Aliens first came out in vinyl, I got that, so I probably have one or two copies of that, as well as a stack of CDs from the various releases and stuff. And my philosophy is that if you're going to do Star Wars, work in the Star Wars franchise, you should be speaking the same musical language as John Williams. I think too often, maybe as a listener too, you probably have this sort of same sort of feeling, is that you've seen a movie, you've seen this franchise, and it has a certain sound and feeling, and they make sequels to it, and you're disappointed because it lost something, because the composer's not speaking that musical language. Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing Star Wars, you should be be influenced by John Williams. So, and I thought, and since I was probably the first to do a score for Warhammer, I think I'm kind of like the music. I created the musical language for Warhammer, because I know, because I've talked to them, there's composers who's had me thrown up in their face about influences, how they wanted to sound like, which I think is logical. So when it comes to Alien, I love the music of all the music of Alien, especially the first three movies, and so I did not want to disappoint people who played a game, an alien space game, and be disappointed that it doesn't have the sound or feel of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I think that was the studio's approach too, as well with the game, because it's a squad-based thing, and they use the same environments. You know, you have things aboard spaceships and aboard colonies, and you have an industrial environment, all that stuff there. That was influenced by the movies, which it should be, because this is a franchise. So
Right.
so I did not want to disappoint the fans at all. It just disappoint me. I wanted this game to sound like they were playing one of the movies. So that was my
Yeah.
goal when I set out to do this score.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels and sounds like that. And one of the things that I love about it that reminds me so much of the originals is that feeling of space, where you use the orchestra in this way where it's like it almost feels like you're walking on plate glass. Like it's so delicate and far away, but it sounds so giant and huge. And
And foreboding.
yeah, and I loved that.
Like what's out there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a kind of a ghost house kind of thing,
Yeah.
So so yeah, one of the things I did for this is kind of a side thing. If you're a real soundtrack fan, is that I went to the first two movies soundtrack CDs, and I ripped them. And what I went through is I went and got sounds, not melodies, not themes, not concepts, but sounds that I thought that made the sound of the aliens. Like, for example, we call echo colenio, which
Yeah.
you hear the blah, 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 and the little horn or trumpet. Da, 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 da. That gives you
Yeah.
more of that feeling of space and foreboding,
Mm-hmm.
and that of bad stuff is going to happen soon. That kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I probably isolated about 50 of those sounds, and
Huh.
and tried to use them whenever I could. It was appropriate in the soundtracks too, and which was happened to be a lot of times because there's a lot of sneaking around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so God, I've got the phone's going off up there, but anyway,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, I had these little sounds I put in there, so I thought it was key indicators of the alien score. A lot of what made the alien scores alien was some of these sounds that was in there. And so besides just the melodies and the approach to the music stuff, there was also the sounds, so there was a lot of sound design in movies, so, and I
Yeah.
wanted to follow that as well in the cues that I did.
You do this really, I love the technique of like you putting the orchestra in octaves and they're kind of moving in unison up this, and that also created this feeling of big space to me by having sections of the orchestra in these giant octaves, moving around. I loved
Yeah,
that.
it does a lot of stuff where it just takes you up a cliff and reaches kind of a crescendo and then just drops you off.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know and that was kind of one of the techniques of the original scores too. They did that as well.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so that is definitely an indicator I wanted to follow, and I think I did that as well in the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah, so
uh,
how did you get involved with it, and how long did you have to work on it, and all of those kinds of fun details?
well, actually I got on pretty early.
Oh,
um,
okay.
And one of the reasons why I got on early is because the people I was working with, Tendelos, I'd already done, some games for them as well, in the Warhammer universe, the Battlefield Gothic, or what do they call it,
Mm-hmm.
and which was a space kind of Warhammer game, which is kind of a different sort of thing, and it was pretty successful. I think they did really well, and so they put together a proposal, which was lucky for me because their proposal was pretty detailed and had a lot of alien stuff in it, and I was able to use their videos and their proposals to score for suggest ideas. So they came up with
Okay.
this proposal, and they took it to Disney 20th Century Fox, and it went from there. So
Okay.
and they got it. So I got in pretty early. I mean, they knew when they wanted to use me, I'm not sure if we had discussed aliens before, and we might have, because one of the races in Warhammer is Tyranids, and Tyranids are very alien-like. They're kind of insectoid sort of things, and they really have that kind of alien sort of feel to them, as far as get too close to them and they'll rip your face off kind of thing. So and plus I've done a lot of stuff in Warhammer with Tyranids, so there's a lot of I was used to doing a lot of sneaking around music, so
Yeah, yeah.
and so that was kind of a natural evolution anyway, because we had Tyranids, we've done stuff for Tyranids before. I've had that kind of, I was always trying to put in that. I was directly, matter of fact, some of the references that I tend to think I did in the past was aliens for some of the things that they wanted.
Okay.
And so I was already doing a lot of that stuff for a long time. I'm on my own. I would have to say that when the scores came and I started composing, I was definitely going through the score and trying to get the feel of it, to look at the orchestrations and see what orchestral devices is being used and all that stuff. And I did it way before I ever got a job, because I thought hopefully someday I'll be working on an alien score. And surprise, surprise! I think my assistant was more surprised than I was. I thought, well, finally it's here, at last,
At last.
And so it kind of blew him away. When he was asking, "What's the new one going to be? What's the new one going to be?" And I sent him this picture of this slavering alien. And I said, "This is the next one." So.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, by the way, my assistant composer is Nikola Jeremic, and he's in Slovenia. And,
cool.
He's been working with me for the last 10 years or so, and,
wow.
and he's starting to do more stuff on his own, which is good, because it's part of the mentoring process. I want him to be able to branch out and do things on his own.
Yeah.
So,
now, how did you two get connected? How did you meet up with someone in Slovenia? He did a lot of begging.
He was contacting me and showing me stuff, and I said, give the guy a shot. Plus, he's young and eager to learn, and I think he has talent, and so
cool.
And so I mentor him. I pay him pretty well for what he does. And this so far it's worked out pretty well. And he's probably wondering what the next thing is, and I don't know what the next thing is, but something will come along. Eventually, usually does. So we'll see.
Yeah, indeed.
Anyway, sorry to interject there.
Oh yeah, no. It's always interesting to find out how people make connections. I guess with regards to listening to some of your Warhammer music, also is epic, huge orchestral. But, and I know there's a lot of it that I have not heard, obviously, but it seems like, just on cursory listens, it tends to be a tiny bit more tonal in a way, the Warhammer music, than what your Aliens music was. Do you have a sense of that, or am I
sort of? I mean, there's like key scenes and things that you have to be more melodic with.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, for example, I kind of divided it down to exploration, discovery, and storytelling, and confrontation, and then ultimately, the boss fight kind of thing, the big confrontations. So, but a lot of that in between stuff is a lot of the moody stuff you hear, and the sneaking around stuff. So it kind of provides a nice contrast to when you actually start doing something melodic that kind of jumps out. And the Alien movies did that a lot too. I mean, Horner definitely did. I mean, of course, Goldsmith did as well, but Horner, he gravitated towards that too, just coming along and doing something that was very, very melodic, or something that was actually kind of sad almost. I mean, like just in the opening scenes of Aliens, you have this very nice violin kind of stuff, and I kind of echoed that, by the way, in the bonus track. If you listen to the bonus track, where I actually redid some of the themes, and I thought it would be useful to do that sort of thing is to reproduce some of the main themes that I heard in the Alien franchise, and because the OSTs for the Alien franchise, or the first three movies, are so old, I don't think they were recorded very well in comparison to today's
Yeah,
recording
yeah.
techniques. I mean, a lot has
Sure.
happened since the 80s, in the audio
Yeah.
world. There's a lot of happened. And so it's someone's going to probably redo it someday. It's going to go back there and take all these scores and re-record them. But
Mm.
until then, I thought it'd be nice to hear what it would sound like more, done more of a modern way, so
Yeah.
you could actually hear it in a more modern style.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so just like jump scare stuff and aliens and stuff. Most of the time you're sneaking around, but there's a little windows of opportunities to become more melodic,
Mm-hmm.
and like for me, it was for like especially was when it was storytelling, when they come across some gruesome scene in the game where they find the workers or the colonists or whatever there, and they pick up diaries and other kind of stuff, and then I could get you know more Horner-ish, I would say, because and there are, but still Golden Soul and Goldsmith and all that, but still it gives you an opportunity to kind of tell a story musically while the story's being told.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm curious, of the games that you've worked on and other projects, to be fair, that you've worked on. What did you think about the flow of this particular game? Because you've talked about, the sneaking around and then the storytelling or the combat or, more adventurous things. But in terms of, RTS type things, what did you think of that flow of energy in this game?
Well, it seems like most of my game uh, composer career, there's it's it's always been like combat and RTS kind of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, God of War definitely was all RTS, and so
yeah,
and the problem is with games is that lots of times you can't always anticipate events. But what you could do is you compose for the events that they say is coming up or they show you,
mm-hmm.
and compose in such a way that it's easier to segue between, say, something that is very quiet and moody and spooky and everything, and segue into something that's more exciting, or at least more interesting, like storytelling or a confrontation, a quick confrontation or something like that. So that's from a musical standpoint. That's what I mostly did with this aliens game, because I think there's unlike, say, Dawn of War 2, you're probably going to be spending most of your time bang bang shoot blow up run away, attack, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff, whereas this one there's a lot more time to develop things because there's a lot of exploration going on. So
mm-hmm.
you're mindful of things like of keys and what keys you're in, and how to make it easy for the people who are doing the game to segue between one segment of music into another. Uh,
Sure,
I mean, a lot of people have done interactive music and made it really, really complex, and it's really a time drain. And you're not really getting it seems like a lot for all the work you put in to make something super interactive. I mean, it works
sure.
for some things. I mean, just like anything, it works for some things, and other things is, they probably could have just done it where, they could have just done it in the mix, in the game.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, we
mm-hmm.
certainly have really great tools now,
Yeah,
where you can do a lot of this mixing and segueing and stuff in the game engines now. I mean, not just game engines now, it's sound engines that's connected to game engines, and the game can trigger things in the sound engine, and you can
right.
program it to do those segues into one thing or the other, and keep track of it. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, that can be done now these days. I, I mean, it's amazing the tools. I was at the GDC, and it's amazing that people could just sit down in front of a program and create a world decorated with terrain and everything and characters and do stuff
Mm-hmm.
just in one sitting. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really crazy now.
yeah.
So, and that's the same thing is going on in the audio world too. There's lots of new tools out there,
Mm-hmm.
lots of things that you can use to make things easier. I mean, I've definitely, I think composing now today is a lot easier than it was 10 years ago.
Mm.
Just because we have just better tools and also
Yeah.
better computers. Because I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many times I'd be working on something and I have to back up every couple of minutes because the computer crashed. Yeah. And that hardly happens anymore. Hardly ever happens
Right.
anymore.
Yep.
And just that alone is worth having a really, really good computers.
Yep.
But
Yep.
and so if it crashes, maybe I only lose a few minutes of stuff, and it's all in here. So I mean, at the point where I'm actually composing, I'm basically dictating because I know it's going to do up
Oh,
here.
okay.
So I'm just, just going through and putting it all out there and,
Mm-hmm.
through the computer and everything, because, I've already thought it through pretty much, I know what I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
do. So if it crashes, well, that's a pain in the butt, of course, but I just go back and just do it again, and
Yeah.
sometimes I have to admit the second time through sometimes was better than the first time. So
For sure. Yeah.
yeah.
So when you're composing, you're not necessarily like, for instance, sitting at a keyboard and improvising. You've thought about it ahead of time. It's come to you.
Yeah,
How does that work?
it's an interesting exercise is that you watch something, especially if you're composing the video, is that you're watching something and as a composer, you ask yourself, what do you hear? Who do you hear playing? What is the music that you hear?
Mm-hmm.
And it pretty much, because of, there's a lot of, if you have a lot of heavy visuals and stuff, it pretty much answers itself because it's just obvious of what you need to do. I mean, if there's a lot of explosions and sound effects and heavy dialogue, I mean, you have to kind of get out of the way, and
Sure. Yeah.
let the all the videos and sound effects and the voiceovers do their work. But if there's a lot of stretches where there's not a lot of stuff going on, and you want to build up some tension and stuff like that, that's different, So pretty much when you're working with video stuff, I think is easier than working on games. Is working with video or movie and stuff. It tells you what to do pretty much, and it's fixed too. And
Yeah.
games is more amorphous. You have situations that you have to you compose for,
Yeah.
and you have to do music stuff so where it all can fit together in kind of an asynchronous way because you never know when some event might be triggered and stuff. So you keep it in a certain key, and hopefully the guys doing the sound of the game, are using all the available, music that I give them so they can segue to the various kind of moods they need as the scenes change. And I think in this game, in this game, and there's a lot of changes of scenery, and it's pretty, it's pretty like pretty drastic. I mean, you go from low ebbs to really high intensity kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
the way the Alien franchise works a lot. From a lot of low intensity stuff, dread, waiting for something to happen, and then something happens.
Yeah.
And so you go from those lows to the highs, and then back down to the lows again. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but you have to have music that can address those kind of situations, and like storytelling, or just a quick encounter, or just creeping along and you're hearing sound and you have your detector beeping saying there's something out there,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So you compose for those situations, more situational composing rather than
Mm-hmm.
than video where you actually have everything's fixed,
Mm-hmm.
and you can
Mm-hmm.
anticipate everything and you can make it flow and do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
So it's different. I think gaming could be a lot more difficult than going to video. I love doing for movies because it's all fixed, man. There's that stuff
Yeah.
moving around, and I can compose directly for all the images, and they're not going to move. They're all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just did 2 episodes for Hammer and Bolter, and so
Okay.
that was a lot of fun too. And
Yeah.
as I thought, it was fun and easy to do. I mean, it flowed pretty quickly, and they sent me a script and everything, and I started composing already because I anticipated, what was going to
Wow.
happen, what the highs and lows are, and started composing ideas. And so when I
Yeah.
actually got the video without music, with just sound effects and voiceover and visuals and stuff, I can compose right to it, and I could plug in some of the pieces that I did ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
basically it's not supposed to move. I mean, actually this episode they did move a bunch of stuff, so I had to make accommodations, but it's not world shaking. You don't have to change
Yeah.
everything. You just have to be able to move stuff around a bit.
Yeah.
And these days, composing is like working with a word processor. You can cut and paste and move and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to do some edits and stuff. And like say these days, it's not prone to crashing anymore when you're trying
Yeah.
to edit something,
Right. Yeah.
which was usually the problem, trying to edit
Yeah.
something and then it crashed because the computer went, oh no, I can't do this. Bang, it was dead.
Yeah. I just
So
can't think that fast.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, the pace, though, for something like TV is so fast, right? You have like 5 minutes to write music for 12 episodes or something like that compared to, spending a couple of years on a game. Or, I mean, does that affect you? Do you have any feelings about needing to write quickly compared to getting to spend time with it?
well, just because of the tools and because I'm more used to it,
Yeah.
I I become quicker and faster in the
Yeah.
way how I do things. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, the tools and the stuff I use allows me to be that way. I could really go fast, so I can. So
Okay.
there's so that it's gotten a lot of better for doing that sort of thing, and mainly it's just a lot of back and forth when you're working on say on a game where you have all these environments and you have all these milestones you want to hit, and
Yeah.
and you need a year to work on it because you work on stuff and
Yeah.
then they send it for feedback and they come back and want some changes and you make changes and send it back. There's a lot of back and forth and everything.
Hmm.
The TV episode kind of thing moves a little fast, but I think one of the reasons why is because it is fixed. The
Yeah.
character's not going to do something unexpected in the middle of the video, so
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
he's there.
That's
so
very true. Yeah.
so yeah, so the games with game stuff, yeah, there's a lot more back and forth, and plus I work on other things too on the side, but still,
Hmm.
mainly, it does takes time to do it. A year. Usually, I spend about a year on a game,
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
like something significant, like a Battlefleet Gothic or something like that.
We talked a little bit about this that, when you started, you kind of already had started the music in a way because they were trying to pitch this project, right? So,
Yeah, I
I
think he had
mean,
already pitched it by the time I got it,
okay,
and
okay.
but they were still in the early stages of
Sure.
things.
Okay,
So I
okay.
mean, they couldn't show me a lot of gameplay or anything, like none. They could show me
Yeah.
artwork, which I love to do. I mean, I always tell them but if we're starting this project, send as much artwork as you can. How
Okay.
much if there's in-game play stuff like that, send that. Anything that
Hmm.
gives me visuals and the feeling sort of things, and I can use that to compose to.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that really generally works out. And usually, I mean, after a while, they start, coming up with a lot of stuff and everything, and things start
Yep.
taking off. And then you can see how well you've done, when you start seeing some of the results put together
Yeah.
with their work and your work. So
Well, and the game looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I love isometric views like that. It's such a huge. It's one of my favorite things is to see that. I love that bird's eye thing, and it's just absolutely gorgeous environments.
yeah, you should see the Demon Hunters game that I worked on last before that, which was
Oh,
another Warhammer game, and it's kind of like an XCOM type of situation. You're
yeah.
familiar with that,
Oh, yeah.
turn-based.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that, only it's Warhammer, and
Oh,
I think
nice.
they're still doing like download content for it and stuff. So I
Oh,
think it
sweet.
must be doing well in sales and stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
and I have to start playing it. I really liked. There's this game. What was the name of the game? Um, uh, hang on just one second.
Oh, yeah. No
The
worries.
thing is called um, Mutant Year Zero. You ever heard of
Okay.
that one?
Mutant what zero? Mutant Mutineer zero?
Mutant Year Zero.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
come
No, I
on.
have not. I'm gonna Google it right now though.
Yeah, and it's a turn-based game. Well, I played it a lot. Matter of fact, I
Okay.
played it several times because talk about a beautiful game. It's just a
Mm,
beautiful game to watch.
yeah.
I think you can even download a demo of it, play like a level of it. But it's really, really a nice, beautiful looking game and nice game mechanics and it's just a lot of fun to play. And so the game for Demon Hunters is a little bit inspired by that. but it was definitely that kind of XCOM approach for
Oh, okay.
turn-based stuff, and
Yeah.
loading
Love
up
that.
your characters with what new
Yeah.
weapons and doing all that.
You've mentioned a few times about keys and, how that can make things, transitions a lot better and make things related, all the things. But, do you, how do you feel about keys? Do you think, I want this to be an A minor, or do you just write the melody and it happens to be an A minor? You know what I mean? Like, how does that
Um,
affect you at all?
I mean, all of the above, kind of.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I hear it in my head. I don't necessarily know what key it is, and
Right.
then I go to the keyboard and I play it,
Yeah.
and I just go, "Oh, it is E minor. I mean, A minor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll go from there. You know.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I do kind of do a lot of minor keys in my stuff just because of the nature of the things I do, and
Yes. Yes.
and like yeah, most of Dawn of War 2 was probably in a minor key, and
Such a
I told
great
a lot of
game.
people I call this kind of music this Space Marines type music. I call it manly music for manly men. So because it's epic,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's probably been my wheelhouse for the last 20 years is doing the epic
Mm.
stuff. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I seem to be okay with it because people keep hiring me to do it. so, so Aliens was kind of a nice change from that because
Mm.
it's because it was a lot more emotional and there was a lot more subtlety
Yep.
and in the sound, and so it allows me to go in different direction. And it just so happens that something, it was a franchise I've been sort of worshiping for years anyway. So I was ready to go. So I want to do
Serendipitous.
something like this, and here's the
Yep.
opportunity to do something like this. And this is great. So,
Yep. Yep. Uh.
yeah, I
Oh,
hear it in my
go ahead.
head, play it out, and I have favorite keys just like anyone, like D minor and C minor and A
Mm.
minor. It's just I do a lot of minor stuff. I throw some major chords in there too, really, but
For
yeah,
sure.
a lot of minor stuff because just the nature of the medium.
Yep. Yep.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a track called "The Queen Must Die," and at the end, you kind of build all these cluster chords, and the brass comes in, and they're just it builds an intensity really quickly, and I really loved also the like piccolos are going crazy and the woodwinds are going crazy with these flourishes in the background. I just really liked how that intensity built at the end of that track.
yeah, well, a lot of practice from doing all that Warhammer stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got after doing the alien stuff, I was like kind of glad to be doing some of the episodes for Warhammer because I got to go back and stop being so subtle. I could be
Right.
go back to being a blunt instrument. Musically. So sure, at
Mm-hmm.
points like the Queen Must Die, we get to you know be more of a blunt instrument there and build up to something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just so happens it's a nice contrast from everything else you've been doing, up to that point. So it
Sure.
really sticks out. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on the soundtrack itself, there are some shorter tracks, and then you kind of stretch out on some of the others to kind of, I think, go on this journey, probably more akin to what it might be like to play a level, is my assumption.
yeah,
And those are really, really fun tracks, and I kept getting stuck on and listening over and over again to Check Your Corners. It's like a 9.5 minute track, and I just
yeah,
loved how you wove the story into that track. Can you talk a little bit about
yeah.
deciding to construct it like that?
Yeah, it's almost asthma,
Yeah.
and so, but yeah, that was very deliberate. That we took an approach where they wanted these really long sections, and it's this thing it stems for everything. They can remix all this stuff
Yeah.
because I mean, here you are. You're talking about an hour's worth of music for like a 40-hour game.
Right.
So having stems and stuff is really important to them because they are able to remix these things and kind of make it sound a bit different and
Yeah.
really stretch out the music for quite a bit. So one of the things I'd done a lot of things where already in demos for them. I'd done some of these things stretched out because, okay, I wanted to. First, I had like some shorter vignettes of things for storytelling and other things, but I also, and they're also all in the same key, so
Mm.
that
Yep.
I anticipated them being, stuck together. And then I sort of stuck on the idea of just taking the various vignettes and stuff I'd done, for the creeping around and, the discovery and some of the storytelling and then encounters and then the major encounters and running away and stuff like that. So, and I put them together and arranged them together in one long track, and they really liked that. They liked that idea. So, I mean, it's kind of unusual to be recording, a 20-minute stem, but but it was fine to me because it's kind of cohesive when it's done like that. And there's
Hmm.
long stretches where you're not a lot enough stuff is happening in the game, I imagine. Uh, so that it's nice to have stuff that's already cohesive to begin with and to work
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
And so, and it was easy enough to edit out because there's multiple tracks there, and it makes it very easy to separate parts out of it and use it separately and stuff like so. So that was kind of the format I gave it to them, and the format that I delivered it and all the stems. So that if you can imagine, like 15 or 20 tracks of stems, each 20 minutes long, you know, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of dead space in some of those tracks because nothing's happening. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't have you don't have a woodwind section playing the entire time, So, but it's easy to edit because you see everything there, and
Hmm.
it's just a matter of splitting stuff you need and everything, and possibly even recombining some things, because it's fluid enough and subtle enough that you can probably recombine some things to come up with something new, which is fine.
Hmm.
I encourage it. I mean, here you take this section over here that had some low brass, and you combine it with this section over here. It was just a lot of high strings and stuff, creepy strings, and put them together. And since it was in the same key, and it's
Hmm.
very subtle sounding, well, you put it together. What do you know? You have something that sounds a little new. And
Yeah.
I can see why that'd become necessary for a very long game because, like I said, 40-hour game, perhaps,
Yep.
you got
Yeah.
to make that stuff stretch, and work out. Otherwise, you pay me for 40 hours of music. I don't think they want to do that. That's a lot of money.
Wouldn't that be nice? That's a lot of writing too, but
That's
yeah.
a lot of writing too.
It's a
Yeah,
lot of
I think it
writing.
took a couple of years. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I always get fooled, so I just ask, is this live orchestra?
No,
Okay.
no.
It sounds great. You know what I mean? Like it sounds
I can
fantastic.
tell you a little story here.
Yeah.
When I mean, I've been a musician all my life. Bass was my primary instrument. Then I played in
Okay.
bands, and I started picking up keyboards, playing those and stuff. And then I got tired of of the drummer breaking furniture, or the guitars coming in high, or
Yeah.
or just noodling around doing so.
Yeah.
When that last band broke up everything, I said I'm not going to be in a band until I could do it all myself. And then the MIDI revolution came along,
Okay.
and since I was at that time I was a software engineer, I wrote my own music MIDI recording and
Wow.
music recording software. Uh, I did one album with it. It's kind of a Rushish kind of prog rock kind of album,
Nice.
and then
Nice.
but by the time I finished that, and they started coming out with software that actually was a lot better and more features than mine. So I got left behind, but it was very, very informative. I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
it really taught me about the underpinnings of MIDI and stuff. I mean, I really understand what MIDI does at all levels because I
Mm.
programmed for it to work and to record,
Yeah.
and I understand all the concepts and everything. So that was pretty nice, the album was a good experience. So around 2000, the computers really started becoming more powerful,
Yeah.
and that was kind of a leg up for me. But at that time I'd already started doing some composing and stuff with the virtual instruments and stuff, and I really got into that from an engineering point of view, uh, as well as a musical point of view, because I had to pretty much. I wasn't exactly rich then. I had to I had to build my own computers, and
Yeah.
and which I was capable of doing because I'm an engineer, and it was kind
Yeah.
of, and now that that you could create scores at computers, well, what do you know? Producers and directors, they want to hear the score before you record it. Oh my, what a concept! And a lot of composers of the period, of that time, were afraid of computers. They didn't know anything about it. So I had
Yeah.
kind of a leg up. I could actually do scores and stuff and show them, hey, this is what it's going to sound like, in your game and stuff like
Cool.
that. And I started getting in contact with people, especially Games Workshop. And then I got the audition for Dawn of War 2, and
Yeah.
by that time I had pretty well equipped studio for the time, because I had kind of a studio already from my band days. I had
Sure.
mixers and all that kind of stuff, and I just had, and then the computers stuff, and then buying virtual instruments and things like that. So I was pretty prepared for that sort of thing. So whereas a lot
Hmm.
of other composers, they weren't prepared at all. This was a whole
Right.
new genre, and suddenly, the directors and producers are asking to hear the score before it was recorded, which
Right.
kind of, and now it's not unreasonable at all because the tools are so good. You can do it just like, I mean, it followed the same kind of arc as virtual reality, and photorealistic animation.
Hmm.
As the tools got better, and it becomes easier and easier and more realistic
Hmm.
as time went by. And so
Yeah.
so I was able to ride the wave, like a surfer. Pardon me.
Hmm.
Like a surfer, I caught the wave, and I've
Yeah.
been riding it ever since, because I was ahead of the curve for a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I was part of a group that actually branched out to a lot of fairly well-known composers and instrument makers that are out there that provide
Okay.
some of the main instruments out there. We're all in this group called Northern Sounds, and we knew each other. You ever heard there's Two Steps from Hell?
Huh.
Well, this guy's pretty well known. I mean, he's probably one of the best composers I've ever met in my life, and he could throw things together. He could throw whole symphonies together in like 3 hours, which I could never do. It
Wow.
was a very slow and painful process, but he was one of the guys in that. So he's been thriving doing his own thing called Two Steps from Hell, and he's very popular, and he's out there, and it's very
Okay.
epic music too,
Okay.
and you hear it everywhere because he's also a ground floor guy like I was. And so,
Okay.
and he was the go-to guy, and he was creating all this music. And the guy has far more knowledge of music than I do. I mean, he was born to it, like Mozart. You know how
Wow.
Mozart was when he was,
Oh yeah.
from a kid. That's how this guy was. He was
Wow.
he was doing symphonies when he was 18.
Wow.
So, so
Incredible.
he was
Yeah.
amazing. So a lot of these people went on to huge careers, and we were all like the people catching the wave. So
Yeah.
that's how I got to this point.
Were
Yeah.
you pretty self-taught, would you say, in terms of music and coding, software engineering? I mean, how did that all work?
Well, it was mostly all self-taught, except for maybe digital electronics, which you actually had to use books and things like that. and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so once I learned that, I mean, for a while I tracked weather satellites for NOAA.
Okay.
And while
Yeah.
I was doing that, I was going to school, and
Cool.
learning digital electronics. And along the process, that I found out I liked programming better than I liked designing hardware. And I
Okay.
could do digital electronics. I could design a computer from scratch,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I did. I made test fixtures where it would test things like hard disk and stuff. And so
Okay.
I did that. I wrote the software and the firmware, and I found out I really liked that better. And
Hmm.
that's where I learned assembly language. And assembly language is very important because it's extremely fast,
Okay.
compared with programming in C language and some of the others. So assembly language is machine language. It's the base thing that the processor knows how to execute. And I got pretty good at that. And that came in handy when I designed my own MIDI software,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
I could write a lot of stuff in machine language that made it fast enough to be able to record everything I needed to do.
Amazing.
So yeah, a lot of this stuff was kind of self-taught,
Mhm.
but it was also evolutionary between,
Yeah.
when I graduated from being a kind of a hardware software engineer to a purely software engineer.
Yeah.
And then the step into music, it was pretty easy by the time really good, fairly decent software came along, because it became just an extension of what I was doing anyway. Instead of writing assembly language, I was now writing music, because assembly language is taking little tiny instructions, short instructions, putting them together to make something complex. And the music
Okay.
is the same thing. You're putting
Yeah.
together little notes and everything, and you come up with something complex. And
Yeah.
you're using an interface where you put all that stuff together and you program it,
Mm-hmm.
either assembly language or C language or whatever. And you're the same way with music. It's all there in front of you on the computer, and you just do it. You program it. I program music.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
I compose software.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. No, that's really cool. I mean, there are people like you with that computer brain, and you. That's just a huge part of your musical language, is also that technical language. I mean, I love that. It fascinates me, and I can only imagine how that one informs the other. Of course, it's going to. Yeah, that's really cool.
and as for the other half of the question, is that I've been involved with music all my life. When I was starting out, when I was like 5 years old, with a record player, listening to band songs, later to musicals and
Okay.
actually music scores and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
later on, getting infatuated with classical music and prog rock. And
Yeah.
I learned some reading of music, but I may compose like a champ, but I read like crap.
Do ya?
So,
Yeah.
but that's okay, because I don't
Yeah.
need to be able to read music, because reading
Right.
music is mainly for performers, and I'm not a performer
Yeah.
in the traditional sense. I'm a
Yeah.
composer, so I could put together the stuff of people who need to read something. I could do
Yes.
that,
Yes.
and I have the
Yeah.
tools to do that, and that helps me along. Or I can hire somebody to do it for me. I mean, if I
Right.
really
Right.
wanted to do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all evolutionary. I mean, it just one thing leads to another, and you arrive at a certain point, and you wonder, how did I get here?
Here you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some song about uh, it was about living in a house, a beautiful house, and I have a beautiful wife, and how did I get here? I think if you remember that pop song about that. Yeah,
I
so
don't.
no, it's Talking Heads or something. I think was
Oh,
everything,
okay. Yeah.
but yeah,
Amazing.
it's just the nature of life, is that a lot of things just become just a progression of events that lead you to a certain
Yep.
outcome or a certain place in life. So
Yep. Yeah. You look back and you're like, oh, I've been doing this for a couple of decades now. Didn't really
yeah,
imagine that would happen. But
that's
yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, such a wonderful franchise. I mean, I think it's a beautiful addition to the world of Alien and Aliens and all the things.
Well,
This game.
I felt like when I got the thing, I was like, once again, it's evolutionary. I've just been building up to this point to have this opportunity,
Right. Yeah.
and I've been preparing for that opportunity most of my composing career, back to my band days, before I was a composer. I'm a composer for, like, now, not a composer for rock and prog rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's yeah, it seemed like I just prepared since that time when the movies first came out, and got the scores and listened
Yeah.
to them to death, and wore out the grooves of the vinyl records that I was that had it, and trying to analyze what they were doing and how it was done,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and uh, and then later on, so yeah, it seems like, oh, okay. When I got to this point, I go, okay, aliens, yeah, okay, I can do this. Matter of fact, it was funny. Here's a story. Is that when I had the meeting, it was not a Zoom meeting, but a Google Meet meeting, and it had all the developer guys there, and there were about 5 guys there and me, and they were like, they're asking me, going, so how do you feel about this? Are you, how is this? Do you feel? They weren't saying it, but they were like, you say, are you feeling anxiety, or is it like too big for you? I'm like, oh no, I'm ready for this. I can't
Yeah.
wait to do this. And then I started telling them what my approach would be, which is basically is that I wanted, I was the lead figure on the Warhammer music and created a lot of that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I got to do what I wanted. But this was a franchise with established sound, with established composers. And I didn't want to, as a fan, be disappointed by playing a game that didn't sound and feel like Alien. And by God, I was going to do a score that sounded like Alien.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was telling them that, and they were like, okay,
Yeah.
sure, okay. Sounds good to us.
Yeah.
Because they were kind of doing the same thing,
Yep.
I mean, the environments are very similar to what you see in the first three movies.
Yeah, I mean, just in the opening notes of the score, you know where you are. I mean, so yeah, I don't think fans will be very disappointed. It sounds
Yeah,
sounds like Alien to me. I love it.
yeah. I just hope the people who really love the scores and stuff, get turned on to it as well and
Yep.
discover it. And that's why I hope they put out a soundtrack so that
Yeah.
those fans can get to it too. Because there's a there's a group of doing something about that's together is all dedicated to aliens, and you can join it, and there's this big huge project, and I'd have to send you a link or something if you're really interested. But
Yeah.
uh, there, I mean, it was just indicative of how large the fan base is for aliens, and the the music as well, because
Sure.
there's a Facebook group called Scores and Soundtracks, and every so once in a while, the alien stuff comes up, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of discussion about it. I mean, there's people out there who are real big fans, and those are the people I don't want to disappoint. I want them to feel like that
Yep.
they got something what they paid for, which was to be in that environment
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
feel that thrill again of watching the movies for the first time and
Yeah.
having your pants scared off. So
Right.
not puking maybe, but hey.
Maybe not puking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what more do you want to say about the experience or the process or anything?
No, I I pretty much blathered all the things that I was thinking about it. I mean,
Good.
at least the larger points. I mean, but there's other details and things you want that you're interested in. I can answer those as well. But
I mean, maybe I would like to know a little bit more about, the orchestra and I mean, I know, you know what I mean. Just with regards to any special instrument choices you wanted to add to it to maybe just give it a tiny bit of Doyle or whatever.
yeah, well, I have a lot of traditional instrument libraries, and most composers in my business, we all have pretty much the same tools because there's the there's these major tools that everyone uses, and I have, like, for example, a number of string libraries, and then one of the ones I used the most for the string libraries for this, I had other choices too, was called Modern Scoring Strings, which was actually recorded by the same people in Hollywood who probably did Aliens, because they're still in the orchestras, the Hollywood orchestras and stuff.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and plus it just had that sound. I mean, not all string libraries sound the same.
Yeah.
Uh, some are way up back there, and some are way close up here, or some
Mm-hmm.
are really spread out. And no, but this particular library, for example, was something that had the sound that I wanted, and you really hear that on that tribute last track, where
Yeah.
I'm redoing stuff because I wanted to sound as good or better than what was on the record, because with
Mm-hmm.
modern scoring techniques. But also beyond that, I mean, it might not have any meaning to you, but I have like over 4 terabytes of instruments,
Oh, geez.
and my
Wow.
my my template is like 1,500 tracks of
Wow.
instruments, and I have room for
Incredible.
a lot more, and I'm going to be adding more, and probably
Yeah.
taking some out too. But I'll be adding more. So the possibilities have, especially in the last 10 years, especially, have really increased, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can do something that's more in line with what you want to do and what you want to sound, including a lot of sound design kind of stuff. And it was
Sure.
really important to do that and to have those kind of tools when I was doing the alien stuff, because I now vetted a whole bunch of instruments to check for their alienness, you might say, and so I could use them, and I did. And there's a lot of things, a lot of instruments in there that just hasn't been heard, was never heard in the original Alien scores at all.
Okay.
because they were pretty much confined to traditional orchestra,
Sure.
even though they did things that were kind of sound designy sort of things like the echo colonial. You need an
Yep.
echo machine to do that.
Yeah.
Although some of them, some of them do, like, some people goofing around where they're doing like horror music, and they instead of using an echo, they explain it by going
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so
Yeah.
you don't actually need sometimes an echo machine. I mean, a colonial people doing colonial, they could do the same thing, just easier and kind of do that
True.
sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that on the scores they use an echo machine, so there was some sound design there. But
Yeah.
today the sound design things that are out there are just there's just a huge amount of stuff out there.
Yeah.
More than I can. I have more instruments than I can listen to in a lifetime. Actually, I mean, I have to be selective and go through it and kind of vet it and do searches and stuff and figure out what particular things are that we useful. And generally, before a project, I'll go through a whole bunch of things. A lot of the stuff that has some of my instruments that has a lot of possibilities, and go through and listen to a lot of things, and then make notes and make it bookmark them, you might say, so that I can use them later in the project. So because this sounds good, sounds something from Aliens, but it wasn't in Aliens, so I think I can use this, and I did.
Nice.
So there's many things like that. I had that capability doing this sound design stuff in order to help along with the moods and to promote the alien universe without detracting from it. Because I mean, I hate when composers end up detracting from the original thing and just not being true enough to the original intent of the composers who actually established the musical language.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I try to do a balanced thing. I try to do stuff that's traditional and the way it was, but also adding a lot of newer instruments, but still in the same feeling and mode of what Aliens was, and trying not to be a distraction,
Right.
Because my job is in support of dialogue and sound effects and video. That's my job. My job is not to stand out. My job is to help enhance the experience of the people who are playing the games or watching the videos or whatever, so I'm in a support role.
Yeah.
And as James Newton Howard famously said in one, although it's not quoted a lot, in one of the extras, I think it was for the movie Signs, he says, I don't write for silence. And that's always stuck with me since that movie's been out a while. He says, and that's true. A lot of we don't write for silence. The only time we write for silence is for like credits or the intro score, and everything else is not for silence. It's in support of everything else. Yeah. And that's the main thing. That's always the most important thing to me. Is I try to do things that's in support of what you're seeing on the screen and what the sounds you're hearing and the dialogue that's going on. Dialogue is king. Dialogue is on top. Nothing ever supplants that. Sound effects and music. Sometimes sound effects is the most important. Sometimes the music's more important. And if you're smart, you go through and you figure out which those things are when you're working with video kind of stuff. And but dialogue's king, and all the rest is all support of that. So
it requires discretion and humility, I guess, to stay out of the way, and to have that kind of sense of that, to be supportive, not in the foreground. Yeah.
John Williams is really good at that, even though he had a very classical approach, a very listenable approach to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't notice the music going on. Lots of times you don't notice the music going, and it's there.
Right. Yeah.
But other times it's in your face, and it really enhances. I think, for example, one of my favorite scenes in all the Star Wars stuff was the first movie, which by the way, when Star Wars first came out, I think I watched it 24 times in a movie theater. Because if you want a side story here, before we get to Star Wars, is that I live in the Bay Area, and Lucas and all those guys are in the Bay Area too. Yeah. And they had this showing of Star Wars before it came out publicly. They had in the Cornet Theater. They had a screening of Star Wars.
Okay.
And I got tickets to it.
Wow.
So I went to the theater. So I was like among the first couple hundred people to see it.
Yeah.
And in that first scene, you know, the credits are coming up and all that stuff, and then people are kind of, you hear clapping and stuff like that. And then when the big ship comes over the top, like this,
yeah,
people were clapping and screaming and shouting, and almost drowned out the movie, because we finally knew we're getting a science fiction movie that actually looked good and sounded good. Because up to that time, there was very, very few movies that were science fiction that were any good. You know, they were flawed in some way.
Yeah.
And that and Aliens probably just opened up the whole genre, so that now everyone wants to do science fiction.
Yeah.
At that moment in the movie theater, people were just cheering and clapping and shouting because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Something that looked that good.
Yeah.
And then throughout the movie, people were clapping and cheering. And at the end, there was a thunderous ovation. So it was quite an experience. So to get back to my other point about John Williams doing really great stuff, is that there's a scene with the Jawas, and they have this big tank-like thing.
Oh,
and just rolling through the desert, and the music behind it is perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect if you listen to it. So that's it. And that's one of those things where you almost felt, if I'm ever a composer and I can do something that good, I'll really feel I've accomplished something. So, because it was just a perfect moment.
Yeah.
And it fit everything. It fit the Jawas, it fit the situation, everything. It was just a perfect scene with perfect music.
Cool.
But anyway,
love it.
My little digression there. So.
No, I love it. Well, let me know if there's anything else you want to add or anything I didn't ask. But it was really enjoyable to hear it and to spend time in that world, and it sounds great. So it was really fun, Doyle. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you like it. And the best praise is that you felt like you were in the alien environment.
Big time.
That's the thing I was mostly aiming for. I wanted you to feel it, and not be disappointed. You know. I've been disappointed too many times watching other movies that just didn't deliver, especially in their sequels. It just didn't deliver.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.